At 5:19 local time, the sea looks flat and almost empty. Then on the radar, 3 contacts appear nearly at once. Not background noise, not weather. Clear surface returns. Range, 22 nautical miles. Bearings spread out. Speeds increasing. Inside the Combat Information Center, nobody raises their voice. Nobody grabs a microphone too quickly. The system speaks first. Tracks classify automatically. Rough vectors draw themselves across the display. 3 surface contacts. Closing in. Up on the flight deck, a yellow shirt stops mid-step. An aircraft tug idles for a moment, then powers down. The catapults remain cold, but the deck falls quiet in a way only sailors immediately understand. It is not panic, it is focus. New contacts bearing 214 through 231. The watch officer leans in, eyes fixed on the plot. These are not fishing boats. Their profiles are too sharp. Their speed changes are too deliberate. No AIS. No radio traffic. At 5:21, the contacts accelerate again. 20 knots, then 24. The carrier does not alter course. Inside CIC, long-range cameras cue automatically. Electro-optical feeds come alive across auxiliary screens. Grey hulls begin to emerge from the haze, still distant but unmistakable. Low silhouettes, squared bows, compact superstructures, naval vessels. One technician adjusts the gain, another tags the feed. Timestamps lock in, every second is being captured. Maintain steady course, no raised voices, no theatrics. At 5:23, the spacing between the 3 contacts begins to tighten. They are no longer moving parallel. They are shaping something intentional. One vessel holds the center line, 2 others drift outward, widening the angle. A fan. That geometry matters. Ships that are simply shadowing usually trail or pace. Ships that intend to influence movement cut across. This is neither. This is containment, drawn slowly across open water. Range now, 16 nautical miles. The identification officer studies the imagery frame by frame. Mast layout. Sensor placement. Forward gun mount. He does not rush, he does not need to. Then the flags become visible, the image sharpens. A block of color snaps into focus on the aft mast of the lead vessel, North Korea. No one in the room reacts outwardly, no one repeats the country name. It is entered into the log. That is enough. At 5:26, the closest point of approach calculation updates. CPA drops below 3 nautical miles. Too close to be accidental, too close to be a simple navigation mistake. The officer of the deck glances once at the repeater, then back toward the forward view. The horizon still looks calm, empty, almost deceptive. Conditions set, key stations manned, no siren, no announcement over the 1MC. Just a subtle change in posture that moves through the ship like a held breath. Below decks, watertight doors remain open, but sailors shift where they stand. Helmets are kept within reach. Gloves go on. Pens pause above logbooks. At 5:28, the outer ships each alter course by 2 degrees. Small adjustments. Intentional adjustments. They are narrowing the carrier's projected path, turning open water into a corridor that is slowly shrinking. Still no radio calls, no warnings, no explanation. The carrier continues straight ahead, speed unchanged. 45,000 tons does not flinch. A Seahawk begins to spool up on deck. Not hurried, not provocative, just ready. Its blades blur into a flat gray disc as it lifts and settles off the starboard quarter, high enough to observe, far enough to remain neutral. Cameras are rolling. At 14 nautical miles, the lead North Korean vessel increases speed again. The wake stretches longer, the bow digs in. The shift is subtle, but the system flags it immediately. Intent confirmed. This is no longer simple presence, this is pressure. Inside CIC, the timeline compresses. Bearings update faster. Distance falls in steady steps. Every variable remains stable except one, them. At 5:31, the CPA drops below 2 nautical miles. That figure lingers on the display longer than the rest. 2 miles is not contact distance. It is miscalculation distance. It is the space where one wrong helm input, one misunderstood signal, can turn steel into global headlines. The carrier does not maneuver. The Seahawk adjusts slightly, keeping all 3 ships in frame. And somewhere between the silence on the bridge and the hum of electronics below, the reality of the moment settles in. This is not practice. The next move will determine who controls what happens next. By 5:33 local time, the geometry is impossible to ignore. 3 contacts, 3 vectors. No randomness left on the plot. The center ship holds steady, disciplined, aimed not at the carrier's bow, but at the water ahead of it. The other 2 continue their slow drift outward, widening the angle just enough to remove the easiest options. This is not pursuit. This is shaping. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Surface Warfare Coordinator does not speculate. He measures. Formation is intentional. No one argues. Speed remains at 24 knots. Not maximum speed, controlled speed, chosen speed, fast enough to close, slow enough to signal restraint. A carefully calibrated pressure point. The carrier's navigation solution updates with current vectors. Turning now would shorten CPA with at least one contact. Turning away would look like avoidance. Turning toward would tighten the squeeze, so the carrier does neither. She holds her line. At 5:35, electronic support measures detect intermittent emissions from the lead vessel. Short pulses, low power, not a targeting lock, not standard search radar either. Probing behavior, testing reaction times, mapping responses, the data is logged. Waveform cataloged, source tagged, nothing changes topside. On the flight deck, the Seahawk drifts laterally in a wide orbit. Its sensors do the work. Forward-looking infrared tracks exhaust plumes, confirming sustained high output from the approaching ships. They are not drifting. They are driving in. Still no radio calls from the North Korean vessels. That silence matters. Professional mariners announce their intentions even during tense encounters. Silence at this range removes ambiguity in only one direction. At 5:37, the outer ship on the port side tightens its turn by 3 degrees. A minor move, but enough to reduce the carrier's maneuvering room. The CPA updates again, 1.8 nautical miles. The watch team calls it out, not because it sounds dramatic, but because it is a fact. On the bridge, the captain studies the horizon ahead. No binoculars, no raised voice. He does not need either. The ship is already telling him everything. Below, CIC cross-checks optical feeds with radar returns. Hull numbers are obscured, paint schemes are clean, equipment remains covered, but deck crews are visible. Helmets on, movement deliberate. Nothing casual about it. At 5:39, the lead ship slows slightly, 22 knots. That is the tell. This is not a rush. It is pacing. They want the carrier to arrive at a particular point in the ocean at a particular time with fewer options than before. Pressure without physical contact. The Seahawk's camera tightens on the lead ship's bridge windows. Heat signatures cluster inside. More personnel than a routine watch would require. Eyes on the glass. Hands near the rails. The footage is time-stamped and archived. At 5:41, the carrier's escorts tighten formation. Not in a way the eye would easily catch, not dramatically, but enough for their radar coverage to overlap completely. To the naked eye, little changes. To the sensors, the picture becomes whole. The North Korean ships continue to close. 1 nautical mile. 9/10, still no hails. Now, the absence of communication is louder than any broadcast could be. Inside CIC, the standard is clear. Shadowing ends when maneuvering space is deliberately constrained. This is no longer coincidence. It is no longer navigation. It is intent. But intent alone does not trigger the next step. A line still has to be crossed. At 5:43, the starboard side North Korean ship makes its move. A deliberate bow-in adjustment. Not aggressive in speed, but aggressive in angle. It is not trying to pass, not trying to trail. It is positioning itself ahead of the carrier's projected track, to block. The room goes still. No alarms, no shouted orders. Just the soft tapping of keyboards as the track updates and the CPA recalculates. 1.3 nautical miles. That number is inside the margin where misunderstanding is no longer a believable explanation. The carrier still does not change course. The Seahawk remains on station, visible, neutral, impossible to ignore. At this distance, every action is being watched. Every emission is being recorded. Every decision will be replayed later, frame by frame, without narration. This is the point where signaling either ends or becomes something more serious. And the ships approaching know that, because from here on, the weight of escalation no longer rests with the carrier. It rests with the vessels still closing. At 5:45 local time, the separation falls below 1 nautical mile. By itself, that number does not sound extraordinary. Ships pass closer than that in crowded straits every day. But this is open ocean. No traffic lanes, no weather, no reason for this convergence. Inside the Combat Information Center, track history scrolls back across the screen. Every maneuver appears in clean digital lines. The pattern is no longer developing, it is complete. The lead North Korean ship alters course again. This time, the move is not subtle. Its bow swings inward, cutting directly across the carrier's projected track instead of pacing alongside it. Speed remains steady. The wake spreads wide. This is not navigation. This is obstruction. The surface warfare coordinator does not raise his voice. He simply names the action for what it is. Contact is maneuvering to block. CPA collapses to less than 1,000 yards. That is the line on the bridge. The carrier's captain watches the horizon through bare glass. No optics, no hesitation. He has seen this geometry before. Everyone in the room has. A blocking move at this distance forces a choice. Turn away and give up space. Turn in and risk contact. hold course and force the other ship to decide. The carrier holds course. Below decks, the ship's posture shifts one step further. Not visible, not dramatic. Systems that had been waiting now stand ready. Displays change color. Tracking gates narrow. The difference is quiet but absolute. The Seahawk slides laterally, keeping the blocking vessel centered in frame. The camera zooms just enough to show the forward mount. Covered, unmanned, but sailors are close by, hands ready. At 5:47, the North Korean ship closes inside 800 yards. At that range, intent no longer has to be interpreted. Movement alone says everything. The carrier's escorts maintain position. They do not crowd in, they do not fall back. Their presence fills the spectrum, even if it does not dominate the horizon. No radio warnings are sent, no flares, no horns. Nothing needs to be said out loud because everything is already clear in plain sight. Inside CIC, one system quietly shifts from monitor status to active ready. No one announces it. The console simply marks the change, logs it, and stamps the time. The blocking ship keeps moving along its intercept path, and then, for the first time, it hesitates. The bow correction slows, rudder angle decreases, not by much, only enough for the system to register it. The pause lasts less than 5 seconds, but it matters. In that instant, the bridge on the other ship stops calculating dominance and starts calculating risk. At 5:49, the second North Korean vessel adjusts as well, opening its turn instead of tightening it. The formation loses its clean symmetry. The fan shape becomes uneven. The lead ship corrects again, trying to reclaim position, but the moment is already gone. The carrier's steady course has pushed the decision back onto them: commit to the block or give way and break off. The Seahawk sensor operator zooms in tighter, capturing faces behind the bridge glass. Heat signatures rise and fall as personnel move inside. Hands gesture. Someone points ahead, then down toward the instruments. Inside CIC, the plot refreshes in real time. CPA stabilizes, then begins to increase. 900 yards becomes 1,000, then more. The blocking move dissolves into a parallel track. The carrier never turned. At 5:52, the lead North Korean ship reduces speed. The wake shortens. The bow lifts slightly as power comes back. The change is unmistakable. It is withdrawal without an actual turn away. The other two ships follow, each peeling outward by a few degrees, rebuilding safe separation one vector at a time. No radio traffic accompanies the maneuver. None is needed. The encounter ends the same way it began, in silence. But something essential has changed. The sea is still calm. The horizon still looks empty. Yet control of the encounter has shifted for good. The North Korean ships remain nearby, visible on sensors and optics, but their geometry no longer constrains movement. Their speed no longer applies pressure. Their formation no longer threatens. They crossed the line and discovered it would not move. By 5:55, CPA has opened beyond 2 nautical miles. The Seahawk widens its orbit. The carrier continues on its original heading. Wake unbroken, speed unchanged. No celebration, no commentary. Only the quiet certainty that the most dangerous part is already behind them, and that the outcome was decided not by force, but by which side refused to blink first. By 5:58 local time, the encounter enters a new phase. Distance is increasing, the geometry is loosening, but nobody relaxes. This is still the most delicate window. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tracks remain firmly locked, not aggressive, just persistent. Every bearing change, every throttle shift, every brief emission is still recorded. The system does not forget just because the pressure has eased. The 3 North Korean ships are no longer closing in, but they have not fully departed either. They remain at range, offset to port and starboard quarters, maintaining visible presence without advancing. It is a shift in posture, not surrender. Observation, not pressure. The Seahawk climbs slightly, widening its sensor horizon. From above, the geometry is unmistakable. The formation that had been compressing space now drifts unevenly, each ship making independent corrections instead of moving as one. That loss of synchronization matters. A disciplined formation applies pressure. A fragmented one absorbs it. At 6:01, electronic support measures detect one final burst of low-power radar from the northernmost ship. Short duration, broad sweep, not a targeting signal. More like curiosity. One last look. The waveform is captured, cataloged, and added to a growing library that already knows more than the other side likely realizes. On the bridge, the captain says nothing. He watches the water ahead, not the ships behind. That alone tells the crew everything. The encounter is only over if it stays over. Below decks, the posture remains unchanged. No systems stand down. Nothing resets until both distance and behavior confirm intent. At 6:04, the southernmost North Korean vessel alters course 5 degrees away from the carrier's track. Not dramatic, deliberate. Its wake bends outward, increasing lateral separation. The others follow within minutes. The formation is dissolving in reverse order. No abrupt turns, no visible frustration, just distance being reclaimed mile by mile. The carrier remains the constant, speed unchanged, heading unchanged, wake unbroken. That consistency is not passive, it is control. The Seahawk's cameras remain live, tracking the disengagement until range exceeds visual clarity. Hulls fade into heat signatures, then into symbols on a screen. At 6:08, the nearest ship drops below 15 knots, well under the speed needed to influence maneuvering room. At that point, the reduction is no longer tactical. It is disengagement. Inside CIC, the Surface Warfare Coordinator updates the log. No extra wording, no conclusions, just facts. Contacts increasing separation, no longer constraining maneuvering. That sentence closes the tactical phase, but not the record. At 6:12, the carrier's escorts ease back into standard spacing. Not visibly, not ceremonially. The electromagnetic picture remains layered, but the emphasis shifts from readiness to watchfulness. The ocean regains its illusion of emptiness. And yet, nothing about the moment is ordinary. Because even though nothing was launched, no warnings were issued, and no messages were broadcast, something irreversible has happened. Every emission, every helm input, every hesitation at the edge of escalation has been captured, stamped in time, and preserved. The North Korean ships did not only reveal intent, they revealed limits. They showed how close they were willing to come, how hard they were willing to press, and exactly where they stopped. That information will outlast the encounter itself. By 6:16, the nearest contact is beyond 5 nautical miles and still opening. Visual confirmation disappears completely. Only radar symbols remain, slowly shrinking toward the horizon. The Seahawk returns to the deck, landing smoothly. Rotors wind down without urgency. The aircraft is secured. The footage is already archived. On the bridge, the captain finally shifts his gaze, not toward where the ships had been, but toward where the carrier is heading next. Forward. Always forward. No one speaks of victory. There is no victory in restraint. Only confirmation. Confirmation that pressure was applied, that escalation was contained, and that on open water, control does not always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it is defined by what never happens, and by who never needed to move at all. By 6:21 local time, the sea has taken back its distance. The 3 North Korean warships are now separated by miles. Their tracks steadily diverging, no longer coordinated, no longer relevant to the carrier's maneuvering space. On radar, they shrink into routine contacts. On the horizon, they are already gone. The carrier never altered course. That matters more than anything else that happened inside CIC. The logs finalize automatically. Timestamps lock, sensor feeds archive, emission libraries update. The encounter passes from live event into permanent record. Nothing is erased. Nothing is exaggerated. This is how such moments end when they are handled correctly. No announcements go out over the ship's speakers. No after-action speech. Sailors return to their work without comment. On the flight deck, operations resume at a measured pace. Catapults cycle, aircraft move, the rhythm returns. But the ship is not quite the same as it was an hour earlier. Because moments like this are not really about distance. They are about judgment. The North Korean ships did not fail because they came too close. Navies do that often enough. They failed because they believed pressure alone could force a reaction. They assumed movement would create leverage. They mistook restraint for hesitation. That was the miscalculation. The carrier's strength was never in speed or maneuvering. It was in refusal. Refusal to be rushed. Refusal to surrender space. Refusal to escalate on someone else's timetable. On open water, control belongs to the side that sets the tempo without changing course. The North Korean formation moved beyond shadowing and into obstruction. They deliberately compressed maneuvering room. They advanced without communication. And when the time came to fully commit, they hesitated. That hesitation decided everything. By holding course, the carrier forced the choice back onto them, block and escalate, or disengage and pull away. They chose the second option because escalation without advantage is not resolve. It is exposure. Every Navy understands that lesson, whether it says so publicly or not. No shots were fired during the encounter, but that does not mean nothing was exchanged. Information moved in one direction. Patterns were exposed. Thresholds were identified. Limits were mapped. Those details do not expire. The North Korean ships sailed away having learned exactly how close they could come before pressure failed. The carrier continued forward, having learned something even more valuable. It never needed to move. At 6:30, the last contact passes beyond the primary surveillance ring. The radar picture simplifies. The sea returns to a single dominant shape, steady and unchallenged. The carrier continues the mission. This encounter will never become a headline. No footage will be released. No official statement will be read. No maps will spread across the internet. Most people will never know it happened. That is exactly the point. professional control is quiet. The most dangerous confrontations are often the ones resolved without spectacle, without sound, without anyone beyond the ship realizing how narrow the margins really were. And the clearest message delivered that morning was not sent by radio, by weapon, or by maneuver. It was sent by a ship that did not flinch. Because in the end, the greatest mistake was not sending 3 warships toward a U.S. aircraft carrier. The greatest mistake was believing the carrier would need to respond at all.